Okay, good.
You have to tell me how to pronounce your last name.
It's
Though, 'cause I don't
Weihofen.
want to butcher
Weihofen.
it. Weihofen. Perfect.
Right.
So Donna Weihofen is joining us today. She is a retired nutritionist from the UW Hospital, and she's written some recipe books, actually 5 cookbooks. And one of them, which is still available, is called Magic Spices. So I'm sure she'll talk a little bit about that today. But I just want to say thank you, Donna, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you. So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay, we're going to talk about winter squashes, and there are a whole, let me see if I have to figure out where the camera is, like a whole variety of winter squashes. The word squash actually comes from an Indian name meaning raw or uncooked. The Native Americans might have eaten the squash really uncooked. They used to eat it mostly raw, but today we usually cook our squash. And they believed it had extreme nutritional properties, and they would actually bury their dead with it to sustain them on their final journey. So they're all different shapes and colors, but they're very nutritious. They're fairly low in calories, but they contain great source of vitamin A and B and C and E and various minerals also. So these are some of the varieties. I'm going to speak to specifically some of the most common ones. I actually have some in person here. This is the acorn squash, which you probably all are quite familiar with. Whoops, I just lost you here. Open lunch meeting. Okay, I'm back.
I think we can all still see you, Donna. Can you see us?
Okay, yeah. Now, yep. So the acorn squash is actually one of the most popular varieties, and I think most of you have seen this. And you try to, it weighs fairly heavy. It's 1 to 3 pounds. Any larger, if they're really big, they become quite dry and stringy. So you should try to feel for kind of a medium weight and a heavy one with kind of dull colored skin. If it's super shiny, then it was picked before it's mature. So it should be kind of dull. And some mixture of oranges and greens are good. Too much orange means that it might be overripe and dry. So just kind of have some orange and some green in there. It lasts really well in a cool, dark area. So it'll last for several months. And of course, you know that you cut it open and you take out the seeds. But you know, any squash, there's one tip I really want to get across for squash, and that's cutting squash is really hard and it can kill you. We're using the knife trying to get through this. So it's really, really difficult and dangerous. So for all my squashes that I'm going to cut open, I put in the microwave for a few minutes. And just so it's softened enough so that I can cut through it with a knife safely. But trying to cut through this by yourself with a knife is sometimes super dangerous. So try not to do that. Let's see if I have a picture here of stuff. I thought I had one. Oh yes, here's the picture of one of my recipes, which I'm sure you've all done before, and it's stuffed acorn squash. And you can stuff it with all kinds of things, but of course you've cooked it first. Most of the time you've cut it in half, taken out the seeds, and probably roasted in the oven upside down, and maybe a pan with a little bit of water in it until it's soft. And then you can, stuff it with whatever you want to do. But this one is stuffed with wild rice. I think wild rice and cranberries make a really nice combination. So that one is really nummy. I like that one a lot. So I think that's probably the most common squash that you might know. Why don't you unmute yourself, the people who are Sue and Barb and Teresa, then you can ask me questions and talk to me too. I'd be happy to answer questions as we go through. Sue and is it Teresa, can you put your picture on? I'd love to see you. I don't know if you can do that or not. Can you check on the bottom where there's a little camera on the bottom of your screen? And if there's a red line through it, click it, and then you should be able to see you. Can you try that? So there you are. Well, good, I'm glad I saw you, good. And Therese, now just put your computer so that you can see your face, Therese. Oh, very much better. Oh, good, I was just looking at a screen, so happy news. So you all know what this is, right? Okay, you can unmute yourself if you want. And you know, the butternut squash is really one of the most common. It's a sweet, nutty taste, and it's kind of, some people think it tastes similar to pumpkin. It's got this characteristically yellow skin with a big blossom at the end. And that's where the seeds are, of course, that's where the seeds are in there. And when it's ripe, it turns really, really orange on the inside. Botanically interesting, the squash is a fruit, but we prepare it like a vegetable. So this can be roasted, it's sauteed, toasted, pureed. We use it in all kinds of things, casseroles and breads and muffins and pies. And I think it's one of the most versatile squashes. In fact, today in the New York Times, they have a food section on Wednesdays, and they have a recipe for butternut squash with bacon and Parmesan cheese. So I get the headlines from the New York Times and I don't subscribe, so I couldn't get the recipe without subscribing. But if you have access to the New York Times, it sounded like it would be a really good recipe. Again, with the butternut squash, I usually put it in the microwave before I try to cut it, because it's still really, really tough to cut. And then you scoop it out. I like to mash it, or I can actually just cut it into cubes and roast it. So it's really versatile. Another one that I have, have you ever seen this one? Delicata squash. It's a sweet, another name is sweet potato squash. It kind of has a brown sugar flavor, and it's a cross between, some people say, pumpkin and fresh corn. It's got a really kind of yummy flavor. It's usually on the small side. This is pretty small. They weigh less than a pound. And this particular squash, even though it's a winter squash, excuse me, you can eat the skin. So the skin is edible. And what you would do is to preheat your oven to about 425 degrees and cut off the ends, and then slice it, cut it in half so that you take out the seeds, and then slice it in 1/4 inch pieces, and put olive oil and salt on it, and put it back in the oven and roast it at 425, maybe 20 minutes or so. And it's just yummy by itself and does not have to be peeled. So that's kind of a nice thing for this particular one. I think it's kind of cute and it's kind of small. So it's a nice, just easy side dish for the winter. That's my show and tell for those. I've got some others.
What was that one called? Donna, what was that one called again?
It's delicata, D-E-L-I-C-A-T-A. Delicata. Delicata. Excuse me. I have a couple, now these are pictures. This is called a sweet dumpling. And it looks kind of like a pumpkin, miniature pumpkin. It's it's larger than an apple, kind of has a flattened top, usually weighs less than a pound. And it's it's green and white and yellow and orange. And it's really hard to peel. You can see it's got all kinds of shapes on it. It's lumpy and bumpy, but the skin is thin and fairly edible. So you could roast this and bake it with the skin on. And whether it's cooked whole or split in half, you can do it either way. You can just put it in the oven and roast it, as long as you poke some holes in it to steam, or split it in half and cook it. And so be sure to poke it. Have you ever had a squash or a potato you didn't poke in the oven? Sue, unmute yourself if you want to. And it blows up and you don't want to clean your oven. So make sure that you pierce it. And if you cut it in half, just remove the seeds, and you can cook it hollow side up or down. Some people I usually put it down in the pan. Some people put it up. I think it's moister if you put it down and roast it in water. But this is a pretty one too. It's called the dumpling, sweet dumpling. And this one is beautiful. This is called a carnival squash. And it's relatively new variety. It was only introduced in 1991 by a breeder. And he was looking for some pretty colors, and he did get the colors. You can see that they're quite beautiful. The temperature of the growing actually influences how colorful they are. I guess if it's a little bit warmer, it produces more green stripes. Many people use it just as a decoration because it's so pretty. This also can be roasted, cut in half or cut into pieces, or it can be scooped out and blended so that you can use it in soups and sauces and stews. And it can also be used like the acorn squash, where you cut it in half and put something fun and yummy in the inside. So it's always good to add a little butter and brown sugar and ginger and cinnamon to these squash recipes, to the squash, and then it makes it yummy. But it's really pretty. This is actually not 100% sure how to pronounce it because it's a Japanese word, and it's kabocha. Does anybody, any of you know? But it actually is from Japan. It's also called a Japanese pumpkin, and it's grown in Japan and South Korea and Thailand. But also in the United States, it's grown in Florida and California. It needs about 100 days to grow, so it's grown in mostly warm areas. In Japan, they use it for vegetable tempuras. They do a lot of tempuras in Japan, and this is often used as a vegetable tempura. It's really hard on the outside, knobby looking skin. Looks like a squatty pumpkin. And it does resemble in taste and looks a butternut squash. Average is about 2 or 3 pounds. You can again use it as a side dish. It can be roasted after cutting in half, scooping it out. So most of these are, you kind of do the same kind of thing with it, but you use different squash. This one you do is quite unique because you do different, it's most unique of the squashes, I think. And this is your spaghetti squash. And it's yellow. It's so different from the inside because it's stringy. So you cut the squash in half, scoop out the seeds, drizzle it with olive oil and salt and pepper, place it cut side down on a baking sheet and roast it for maybe about 40 minutes. And then you pull it out, and then you take a fork and you scoop it with a fork, and it turns into like strings of pasta. Has anybody done it? I'd like to have you talk to me if you want to. Barb, yes? Tell me about it. How have you done it?
We prepared it the way you had just said.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing is, don't be disappointed because it doesn't taste like spaghetti.
You have to put a good sauce on the top.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't taste like spaghetti.
I have done it multiple times. So I try to eat kind of a lower carb diet. And I agree with Barb. The first time I tried it, it's like, this does not taste like noodles. But with a good sauce on top, I have grown to really, really love it. So I make my own homemade spaghetti sauce. Ooh, with a little turkey sausage in there or something. Oh, it's so good. So I've grown to love it.
Well, the sauce is what covers it up, and then it's kind of this. It has a little bit of the texture of the spaghetti, so if you can kind of fool yourself and say this is spaghetti, but you save so many calories. Do you know in half a cup of spaghetti there is 100 calories? That's without the sauce, and so spaghetti really adds up in calories. Like you go to a restaurant and they serve you a spaghetti dinner, you get massive amounts of spaghetti, 100 calories per half cup. Can you imagine what a half cup of spaghetti looks like? So this does save you tons and tons of calories. You can also do with, this is not a winter squash, this is for summer squash, this is zucchini. But you could take zucchini and spiralize it. Have you done that?
Yes, multiple times as well.
And that turns into the ribbon shapes, and that's, how do you like that one?
I like that one actually maybe sometimes even better. I feel like you can make it a little firmer. Does that make sense? Like you can make the zucchini,
Because you can make it different sizes. You can make it, the spaghetti is really skinny, the spaghetti sauce, but spaghetti squash, I'm sorry. But this one you could make different shapes, Yeah. Have you done this one, Barb?
No.
Okay. Because does anybody have a spiralizer? No. Yeah. So talk to me. Go on mute. Go on the mute button and just click it. There, now you can talk.
I do have one. I use it in place of spaghetti.
Do you? And
Yeah.
so do you do zucchini with it, or what do you use?
I use the zucchini.
Do you?
So like zucchini noodles.
Yeah,
is what we
yeah.
call it. Yeah.
Is this one that you wind
Is it-
yourself, a hand one?
Mine hooks onto the KitchenAid mixer.
Oh, okay. Do you do it very often?
Not as often as we should, but
Actually, I know I have a spiralizer, and then for a while I was doing it, and then I put it away, and I forgot about it, and I don't do it anymore. You know, it's kind of like,
if it's not on the counter, you do forget about it.
yeah. So I know I've got so much stuff all over.
Now, do you really
I
have
will
to
freeze
talk to
mine.
yourself to figure that this tastes like spaghetti? You really have to train yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It takes
I
more
just think it
flavor of the
makes-
sauce.
Mhm. Yeah, so you have to work at
Yeah,
the sauce.
and my stomach, I mean, my stomach feels so much better when I eat this versus the noodles. Like, I don't get as bloated. So to me, it's worth it. It's worth it to use the squash as noodles because my
Okay.
tummy feels less bloated.
And do you have your spiralizer readily accessible? See, mine's kind of put away.
I don't own one, so now you guys make me want to order one. I literally like take my grater.
Oh no,
So I need to
spiralizer
order.
is wonderful.
Yeah, I'm gonna order one.
It's just, it makes these
Amazon,
ribbons of
here I
spaghetti.
come.
Yeah, yes. And it's, the smaller ones are, you know, are better as far as using from cooking. If you use those big honking ones that, you know, grow in the gardens and they get really, really big, those are good. You could mash those probably. You cook them and mash them, but it actually for most of the cooking, you want these small ones. And most of you probably have taken it and just cut it and put it in a skillet and steamed it for a while. And the steam kind of cooks it. And then if you keep cooking it, it kind of fries it. So it might even get a little bit crisp. And then add onions and other vegetables to it. What if anybody else share what they've done with zucchini? Sue, have you done anything with zucchini?
Other than the zoodles, I've
No,
had
yeah.
people that have made zucchini bread. I haven't done it, but
Okay. Yeah, that's when zucchini are really around and people are trying to get rid of them. It's zucchini bread, zucchini cake, you know, because it makes it so much moisture and you don't have to use very much oil that way. So it's quite versatile. And you don't peel it if you're going to fry it in the pan. You just, you know, slice it and put it in with some oil. Well, just cook for a little bit of oil at first and then onions and peppers and whatever.
I love the
So-
idea of the microwave because I agree with you. It's hard to cut sometimes. So I love the idea of throwing it in the microwave first. To
Oh,
get
that
it
is,
soft.
yeah, that's really, really important. I was looking at some recipes for zucchini and many people use a tomato sauce and garlic and onions with the zucchini, and that's often served at restaurants too. You know, it's kind of a side dish. In France, they use it in ratatouille, and in various stews. So let's see, I guess this ratatouille originated in the town of Nice in France. And as we talked about, it can be baked or broiled or deep fried. I guess deep fried is pretty good too, but kind of takes away the reason we do it with squash. And another one this is my last one, but this is similar to zucchini. This is another summer squash. It's a crookneck squash or yellow squash. And can be used just like the zucchini can be. And so it's just kind of cut up in zucchini. I did a TV show one time with, I stuffed zucchini and patty pans. These are patty pan squash. They are so adorable. You can get those in the farmer's market. I don't know if they have them in the store or not. They're just adorable, and they're different shapes, and you can scoop them out and then stuff them with various things. You can have a spinach and sausage stuffing, a wild rice stuffing, but it's kind of like, it looks fancy. If you serve this for company, you could do it ahead, and they think it's really, you know, wow, it's a different kind of a vegetable. Looks really pretty on your plate as a side dish, especially those little patty pans. So I forget about this as a vegetable when I have company, but you should probably do that. You can impress people. Anybody done that one? let me see what's up. I thought I had one more. Oh, this is little stuffed tiny little pumpkins there. Pumpkins. Oh, and that's my Magic Spices cookbook. That's one of my cookbooks that has recipes that are really, they're simple, but they use just common everyday spices and making foods that are tasty. And I'm not a health nut, and I'm not a purist. I like my sugar, but I just like to save calories when I can. And I like, first, the food has to be tasty or you're never going to make it again. And then you want it to be healthy, but it doesn't have to be like over the top healthy. You don't have to go vegan to be healthy. So anyway, those recipes are available. That cookbook is available if you want it from me, because it's on print on demand. So that's one of my recipes. I'm going to show you a couple recipes, and if you're interested in the recipes, if you email me, I could send you the recipes. I'm sure maybe you've all made butternut squash soup, but this one is a butternut squash, apple, and carrot soup. And it has, besides the butternut squash, it has some carrots, some apples, potato, chicken broth, and a little bit of ground fennel. Why would I add fennel to this soup? You know what fennel tastes like?
It's like sausage.
Yes, it adds a sausage taste. It's wonderful. I love sausage taste, and so it just adds a touch of sausage taste. And a little white pepper and a little bit of sherry, and all blended together. So this is like a smooth butternut squash soup. I mean, I have other ones too, butternut squash soup with apples. There's a variety of butternut squash soups. Usually add a little brandy or something else, or sherry. When you mash squash, you can also use it to save some calories in, like, these are cookies. Let me see if I can get a picture of that one. These are walnut chocolate chip cookies with mashed squash. And I say, you won't believe how good these cookies taste until you try them. They're soft and yummy, and they were a big hit for my family. This has a little, not that much butter, shortening, half a cup of sugar and brown sugar, and then a cup and a half of mashed butternut squash. 1.5 cups of mashed butternut squash with flour, oatmeal, walnuts, and chocolate chips. And so what makes the cookies good and moist is that squash in there. So it keeps them soft and moist without adding a lot of oil. So in this whole recipe, there was only half a cup. So those are good. And I threw in the chocolate chips because that's the only way I can get my family to eat it. They love the chocolate chips.
What were they called again, Donna? What were those cookies called?
Walnut chocolate chip cookies with mashed squash. But I have the recipe. If you want the recipe, you just email me and I will email recipes back to you. That's the easiest way to do it. And then this one I actually love a lot. This is from a cookbook called Mom's Updated Recipe Box. This is one of my cookbooks. This is, I call it butternut squash and apple bake. And my description is, this is so good you could almost serve it for dessert. It's almost like an apple pie flavor with mashed squash on top. So what it is mashed butternut squash and butter and salt and pepper and brown sugar and an apple. And is the apple, let's see, what's the apples? Apples, let's see. I was wondering what you did with the apple here, mashed squash. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me look at the recipe here. Mash the squash, remove the seeds, cook it, preheat the oven. Thinly slice the apples. Oh, that's where the apples come in. Okay, the apples are at the bottom of the pan. So there's thinly sliced apples at the bottom. And then it's the mashed butternut squash on top. And then the topping is like something like cornflakes and pecans and butter and brown sugar. And I served it as a vegetable. And people say, oh my gosh, could be dessert. You know, so it was really yummy. And that is a recipe I can send you if you're interested. So again, it's sliced apples on the bottom there are pre-cooked, and the squash, and then the topping, cereal pecan topping. This isn't a squash, but it's kind of in the same vein, and we're thinking about Thanksgiving. One of my recipes for sweet potatoes is sweet potatoes and cranberries. And so I just thought I'd throw this in for if you're interested. You can use cooked or canned sweet potatoes. I think the fresh are lots better. And fresh cranberries and butter and brown sugar just mixed together, and then you put the topping of pecans and oats and flour on top and bake it. And it's just yummy, yummy like that. So that is the end of my recipes. And kind of in reviewing for squash, there's the major baking methods are you can just bake it. We've talked about just putting it in the oven and baking it, roasting it. Sometimes I made a soup or a stew the other day that had squash in it, but it was more like a chili, but it had squash in it. And I cut it in little pieces and then browned it in the pan so that the little pieces got brown and firm, and then put it aside. And I put it in at the last minute before I served it in the soup so it wouldn't just get all mushy. And you could do that with sweet potatoes too, either sweet potatoes or squash. So roasting is always good, and roasting always brings out the sugar and flavor of squash. And you can always just boil it. You cut it in pieces and boil it, and that's what you do if you're trying to make a puree, which you're going to use for, for soup or for zucchini bread or for the any of the breads and cookies. And you can microwave it. So there's all kinds of ways that you can cook these squash. But they're very pretty, they're very healthy, and they're very versatile. So we can talk if you have any other questions. I'd answer any other questions, even any nutrition questions too. I don't mind talking about anything. So if you want to put your phones, unmute yourself and talk to me, that would be fantastic.
Now, what is your email address if we wanted to email you to get these recipes?
Well, that is a good question. You see my name, Donna Wyhoffen, on the screen?
Yeah.
I'll put it together, no space there, at gmail.com.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's WEIHOFEN.
No capitals.
No, and no spaces.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you all from Verona?
No, I'm from Madison.
Okay.
We used to live in Verona. We lived in Verona for a lot of years, and then we sold our big house and we downsized and moved to Madison.
Okay. In a condo?